So I went into the Lake Carriers Association, and I signed up. I had my Siemens card at that time. We got a job for you to be such and such a dock, such and such a day, and pick up this ship wiper at that time. Instead of being coal pested, this was an oil-fired ship. So you was wiper. You started out as wiper. It means you have to go down and chip and paint things and clean up, do little cleanup duties and stuff like that. Mostly it was washing down and chipping and painting. And this was in the spring. So these ships were just, I remember this was in Toledo. It was in Toledo I had to go get this, and my dad took me, I went to catch a bus and I missed the bus, and my dad drove me all the way up to somewhere by Sandusky till we got in front of the bus. And that was a big, long ship. That was in April, and that was a big, long ship. It was a ship that they had been an ocean tanker, and they cut the section of it out, the middle section of it out, and they put they cut the, I don't know what all they cut out, but they kept the engine room from the tanker with the oil-fired stuff, and they took all the tanks out and made it a bulk carrier so they could put ore in there, and we had all the hatches there. It was like 930 feet long. It was, at that time it was like almost the longest ship on the lake. And so I went up and got on that, and I was on that for, I don't know, not too much. It was always cleaning up and chipping and all that kind of crap, but I never was good at that. That was in April or May, and then I stayed on there a few months, and I remember we went up to Silver Bay, and then we went down, got off, we came down, one time we went to Buffalo. And Buffalo is where I got off that ship, I think. And I was running around Lorraine, and I met this kid, I can't remember his name except it was Jim something, and he started talking about going to sea. He found out I was on the lakes, and he said, well, I'm going to go to New York City, and I'm going to ship out with the SIU, which was a Siemens, anyhow, it was a Siemens union. So I had a better chance of shipping to him because at that time I had an Oilers card. Both went to New York City, and we went into first we went into NMU Hall, which was right near there, and neither one of us liked that too much. And we didn't have too much of a chance of getting a job in there either. So we went over to Brooklyn, took the subway over to Brooklyn and found the SIU Hall. Went over there and we signed up, and they made us go somewhere and carry picket signs. I remember that. And also, I went to a lifeboatman school with the SIU. And then he didn't get it. He never did get a job because he was non-rated, and he never did get a job. But I got a job on the Azalea City as an oiler. So that was my first job going out of New York City. And Azalea City went from New York to Puerto Rico and back and forth. It was about 4 or 5 day run, and we were taking stores down to Puerto Rico. Can't remember what it was. Well, I got that job on the Azalea City, and I stayed on there for, a couple months, and then I got off and I went to this lifeboatman school through the union, and then I went up and I upgraded my ticket to electrician, and then I went back to the union hall and I got this job as second electrician on the Detroit, which was another ship carrying. That one carried cars in the hull and cows on deck to Puerto Rico. And that's the one where I went out and I helped the cowhand birth all these calves and do all this stuff. And all these cows that around there were pregnant because they wanted a long time to milk. They didn't raise milk cows in Puerto Rico because of the weather being so warm. Milk cows didn't do good there. So they sent the cows down there that were either pregnant or had just had calves. So a lot of these cows on the ship had calves, and this guy was bringing these calves all the time. And so I went out there and helped him. He showed me what to do, and I helped him bring those calves into the world. And then on that ship, I remember one time we had trouble with a winch, and the chief electrician, his name was Wade something, were ones in charge of taking care of winches. So when we got to Puerto Rico, he would stand one watch, and then during a certain time, and then I would stand another watch. I would be on the ship during a certain time, and I was supposed to fix that electrical stuff. the winches, so they could unload stuff. One time, something happened with the winches, and the chief engineer was right there, and he told the winch operator, "Oh, you're not doing that right." So he went over there and grabbed that winch, and this guy, and there was a car, was about 50 feet up in the air already. It wasn't through the hatch, but it was still in the hatch of the ship, and there was all these cars down below, and this guy said, "Well, this ain't working right." And she said, "Well, you got it going the wrong way." So he went over there and grabbed that winch and slammed that thing, and that car went right down, bang, smashed 2 or 3 cars down there, and smashed that car all to hell. Well, anyhow, then that was so this is the start of my seagoing career, really, I guess. Most senior members would get it. Well, I wasn't very senior, so I had to take, whatever jobs I could get. And I got this job out of New York City. I had to go to Norfolk to pick it up. So I went to Norfolk, and here was my old Navy ship, the Regal, sitting on the other side of the dock. And this ship I got on, the Point de Seigne, was really bad, man. I mean, this thing was a wreck. And it was an old up and down engine, which there wasn't, I don't know, there probably wasn't 5% of the U.S. ships that had up and down engines at that time, maybe less than that. That must have been in 63. I think that was in 63. I think it was just about Christmas of 63. When I got in the Navy in 61 and I got home in 62, and then I worked 9 months. So that would be brought us up to the spring of 63, and then I went on the lakes, and then I went on these other 2. But anyhow, we got on there, and they had this old drunken chief engineer and this drunken first assistant, and this ship hadn't been offshore for 15 years. Were drunk half the time, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. He was the second assistant engineer, and so we got to know each other pretty good. And so that ship went from Norfolk, I don't know where we went to pick up a cargo, but we picked up a cargo, what they call handshake cargo. And this was all wheat and grain for, it was a giveaway cargo for some foreign country. So I remember we went across the Atlantic. We had a hell of a time because they hadn't washed, this chief and first assistant were so drunk all the time, they didn't do things right. And they hadn't washed out the potable, the drinking water tanks. And so they had some kind of a preservative in those drinking water tanks. Was like oily taste or something. Oh, it's awful. Evaporators on that ship to make water, but they didn't work very good because these guys never fixed them up. They never did what they were supposed to do with them. We were making this trip across the Atlantic, going to the Mediterranean, to Piraeus, Greece. And this ship was so old and crummy that the forecastle, or the room, what we call a forecastle, that I had with a partner of mine that was the fireman. He was the fireman, I was the oiler. And this was the first one before you went on the deck, is the ship's on the lake. And so they had all this grain in these holes. These weren't bags of grain, this was bulk grain. They had all these bags all this grain in these holes, and the ship would roll back and forth like this. And when the ship would roll one way, the water would come up over the deck. Well, our forecastle was the first one right there next to the deck. If you were coming from the deck, you walked through the door. If you turned right, you went right through our door in our forecastle. But it was all rusted out there. So when the water came over the deck, it used to run right into our forecastle because it was all rusted there. So we had to get everything up off the floor. So when we was in rougher weather and the ship was rolling, all this salt water rolling around on the floor, back and forth all night long, all day long. And we had to keep our shoes and our clothes and everything up off the deck. You had maybe 2-3 inches of salt water rolling around on the deck. Of course, and then when we got out of that water, it would all run back out on the deck and it would dry up, and we mopped it up and cleaned it up a little bit. But anyhow, I learned a little up and down engine then, which I'd heard my dad talk about, but which not very many guys had done even at that time. So then when we got to the other side, why, the guys that were the big drinkers and alcoholics in the crew, they saw that this first assistant and chief engineer was drunk, and the captain was a drunk too. He could walk around with a bottle of glass of whiskey all the time, had that much glass in the whiskey in the glass all the time. Called him Jumper Host Thompson. He was from some oil company, and these guys, when we get hit by Rios, why, they got drunk. So one of the guys that got drunk was the third assistant that I worked with. He was a little old short guy, about 5'2", and about 200 pounds. And when we hit the first port, why, he sent some Greek guy over there, he gets to give him some money and told him to get a bottle. And he locked himself in his forecastle, and then he would have the guy have money out the window, and the guy would go get him a bottle, and he'd knock on the window, on the porthole when he come back, and he stayed locked in there for 2 or 3 days. And so then when we came back, we got another, I don't know, I guess we came back with another cargo, I can't remember. But one of the places we hit was Port Everglades in